Hello everyone, this is Lala, and today I'm going to be publishing and talking about and ranking the Era 4 women who have done at least 3 seasons of the challenge. And this is going up to Battle of the Eras, obviously. So I'm going to rank them on a few of the criteria that I am definitely going to go into, and there's not much detail on these women since they didn't have much of a chance to return consistently, one, and two, there's not nearly as many Era 4 women who have done at least 3 seasons, so compared to the other eras, there's not going to be that many of them. So, onto the criteria that I'm using to rank these women. So, the first criteria that I am looking into are the competitions. So, this involves the dailies, eliminations, and final performances. So, the more early boots someone has, the lower they are going to be on the list, which should just be self explanatory because it means that you're an easy out and you don't do well in the game, essentially. I am also looking into final wins, finals reached, and getting close to the final. So, getting close to the final, to me, is defined as people who were eliminated in the final 2 rounds before the final. So, that's kind of how I consider the end game. So, people who get it to the second to last round before the final and beyond. That's what I consider the end game. And anyone who makes it to that period, I see that as a successful season. Finals reached obviously means the amount of finals a contestant did. This would also be important because let's just say you have like 10 finals appearances, but you've won none of them. That means you aren't successful at finals, so that's something that I am taking into consideration. And obviously, the final wins meaning the amount of seasons that you've won. So let's just say you've made it to 3 finals and you've won all 3 of those finals. It means that you're very good at finals and you have 3 wins, which is a good thing. So this next part doesn't really affect Era 4 much, but I stated it for the other 3 eras, I'm just gonna state it here. Team challenges do inflate daily numbers, so anyone who has a lot of team challenge wins, I'm not going to heavily factor at all, but dailies isn't something that I heavily focus on anyways, in comparison. If you have a bad elimination record, you're going to be lower on the list. Since it means, one, you find yourself in elimination, you can't avoid elimination, and two, it means that you can't clutch a win to save yourself. So chances are if you are in elimination, you're going to go home, meaning that you're not going to make it to the final. And chances are you're not going to make it close to a final either. And then the final part of this category that I'm looking into, which I kind of just mentioned briefly, is the more finals lost, the more finals have missed, and the more seasons missed where you don't even get close to the final. So again, the last 2 rounds of the final, you're going to be lower on the list. So if you've been in 10 finals and you flopped in 8 of them, you're going to be lower on the list in comparison. If you've missed most of the final appearances or most of the finals that you were eligible for, and if you didn't make it to the end game of any of the seasons you were in, or an limited amount of the seasons you're in, you'll be lower on the list. The next criteria that I am looking into is longevity, which is the amount of seasons someone did and the right bracket of years that they competed in. This isn't going to factor much for the Era 4 women or anyone from Era 4 because it's literally the most recent era, and the start of Era 4 was in late 2017. So that's like 6 or 7 years, really. Yeah, 7 years for 2024 sake, so not much of a time gap, anyways. But I mentioned it for the other eras, so I might as well mention it here. So the less season someone did, you're most likely going to be lower on the list, though I don't know how much that's really going to be in effect with Era 4. Seasons that only in a few years time frame will most likely be lower on the list. So let's just say someone did 3 or 4 seasons only within like a 2-year period. Chances are they're probably going to be lower on the list than someone who did the same amount of seasons or more seasons but in a longer period of time and also having success in that period. So that's something to remember. The more seasons someone did and the more success they have on those more seasons, they're going to be a lot higher on the list since it shows more consistency in them being good challengers and longevity in the fact that they can repeat their success on many seasons. Also, like I mentioned earlier, this isn't going to be much an effect on Era 4 people, but If your seasons were done in many years slash decades and you have success in that, chances are you're most likely going to be higher on the list because it shows longevity and replicating that success in many different years, many different seasons, and many different formats. The third category that I am looking into is the eras and the formats. So once again, this isn't going to be much of a factor when it comes to era 4 because as I'm recording this, you can't get more modern than era 4, and all but one of the seasons are individual or paired seasons, and even the one team season that's done here is replicated or implemented differently than they were in eras 1 and 2. So seasons with no eliminations will be lower on the list. That won't apply to Era 4 at all. That will really only be applied to Era 1 and some Era 2 people where they competed on the island. Success in duo slash pair or individual seasons will be higher on the list because one, it means less winners, less finalists, less people who get close to the final. Two, it generally means that more people are getting eliminated throughout the season. So you have to work very, very, very hard to get to the final. Unlike the other seasons where you can have over half of the cast or half of the cast gets to the final. That's not happening with dual or individual seasons. So seasons with vote-offs or everyone goes to the finals are lower on the list. Like I mentioned, that won't apply to anyone from Era 4, so they shouldn't have to worry about that. So if you had success on a team season, especially those with barely any eliminations, you will be lower on the list. Obviously, the only season that an Era 4 person could have participated in was War of the Worlds 2, where, yes, there were two teams from the very beginning to the very end, but there were a lot more eliminations in that season compared to essentially all the other team seasons in the past. And even when you make it to the final, they're cutting a lot of those finalists down, where at the final stretch of the final, there's only 4 people with each team. So, just because you made it to the final doesn't mean you're going to be a winner or a runner-up. So that wasn't the case with a lot of these older seasons. Obviously, success in modern seasons means you'll be higher on the list. You can't get more modern than Era 4 as I'm recording this. And modern seasons are generally seen as those that are individual or dual format, so pretty self-explanatory. And obviously, the final category that I am looking into is politics. So this will include the alliances that they were in a particular season or through several seasons, the game moves they made throughout their particular seasons, and avoiding eliminations due to politics within a season. That is something that I do feel like deserves to be getting credit and that I am going to be considering when I'm talking about these individuals. Sorry, I forgot to mention that I also am working on the Era 4 admin video at the exact same time. So I'm essentially doing the same thing that I did with the Era 3. People are doing them both back to back, so they should be put out roughly around the same time. Anyways, let's just get to the list. At 14th place, so dead last here, is Sofia Jujuy Jiminez, hopefully I said that correctly, who competed on the Challenge Argentina World Championship and Battle for a New Champion. This was a very easy choice for me. From what I could research, she was eliminated early on in the season as she was the third female boot, losing with Morita to Claudia and Oki. So one early out there. She was somehow cast on a World Championship, mainly because Argentina was filmed right before the season, and the finalists had no time to recover to do the season, where she was paired up with Nelson, and they were eliminated by Kellyanne and Tristan in the first official paired elimination of the season. A similar fate happened to her on Battle for a New Champion, where she was chosen to face Raven in the second women's elimination, where she lost there too. She really has accomplished nothing during her short time in her challenge career, and in 2 of those seasons, I do think the language barrier was an issue, but she even flopped in Argentina, where everyone spoke Spanish. At 13th is Zara Zoffany, who competed on UK World Championship and Battle for a New Champion. I'm sure this might be controversial to some people due to the fact that she was seconds away from winning her first season, but it's the entire context of that specific season is what I have her low. The Challenge UK was only 5 episodes, half of the cast made it to the final, and you only had to escape 4 boots to get there. But she did well in the final, hence almost winning. But if this season was more like a normal season, she would have been a lot higher on the season. But obviously, they shortened the season due to Queen Elizabeth's, or Queen Victoria's, yeah, I think her name's Queen Victoria's untimely passing. Once she made it onto World Championship, which is a lot more similar to a normal challenge season, she did win the first daily of the season and showed a lot of promise. She was paired up with Wes, and they did win an early daily to target the Argentinias, where we see her do well in the dailies, which will be a pattern here, but it really did nothing for them, as they were targeted the following round due to Wes's messiness as usual, and they were taken out by Ben and Kaycee. Her third season was actually on the flagship show, Battle for a New Champion, where she was arguably the best woman on the season when it came to the dailies. As she won 5 of them, I do think a lot of these wins were team wins, so yeah. Politically, she was on the outs due to being an international person, which of course she would, since she's one of them, and she would obviously align with the international people. And despite kissing up to the majority, she kind of just isolated herself from the house, again with Horacio, and was targeted due to not being in the main alliance, and was sent home as soon as the conquest portion started, with her getting booted close to the end game by Canon and Horacio, but not getting there. Really, if her UK season was a longer season, she would be higher, and while Battle for a New Champion is a solid season for her, it wasn't enough to have me put her higher. And just looking at her elimination record, it really isn't great, and I don't feel good about her politically either. At second, I have Tula Fazakerley, who competed on War of the Worlds 2, Total Madness, Double Agents, Spies, Lies, and Allies, and Battle for a New Champion. So, now we're getting into someone who has done several seasons, but still never made it to a final as I am recording this. Tula's first season was War of the Worlds 2, where she did not have many connections, and she, as well as her friend from their show, Sean, were the first sent into their respective eliminations, and she was the first woman properly booted against Georgia. And I mentioned properly booted because there were a few women who DQ'd or quit before her elimination. She returned on Total Madness, and it really wasn't a notable season for her, in my opinion, though she was seen as one of the weaker women that might have been carried to the end as a layup for an elimination or a final, but a foot injury caused her to get DQ'd mid-season. Double Agents was easily her best season as she built a lot of relationships with the new woman and orchestrated the move of having Anissa and Tori face off against one another early on in the season, which took out Tori. I do think she benefited from being CT's partner in most of the season, and she did beat Anissa to get her star, but she lost in the final women's round against Amber, which was her best chance of making it to the final, and I think this season was her best chance of making it to a final. Spies, Lies, and Allies had the veteran alliance take over the entire season, but it was clear that she was at the bottom of the alliance, and there's a lot of mistrust there. But despite that, she was safe for most of the season. Once most of the rookie women were gone, and they're kind of focused on who they wanted to take to the end, Tula was targeted as she lost 2 eliminations back to back, where she was taken out by Amanda, and she came back right after that because Ashley's DQ kind of fucked up the numbers, and was taken out in the second to last female round to Emmy. And it was clear that her pre-gaming on Battle for a New Champion really did her absolutely no good, as she lacked the numbers and was consistently targeted by the house, where she had to win 2 eliminations against Jessica and Kaz, not the biggest competition, especially regarding eliminations, before being taken out by Kaycee in the mid-season portion. Her elimination record really isn't good, and she hasn't been to a final ever, only coming close twice out of the many seasons that she has done. And outside of one move, I don't really think she's the strongest politically either. At 11th place is Kayleigh Morris, who competed on Vendettas, Final Reckoning, and War of the Worlds 2. Some might not be shocked that she isn't dead last, and there is definitely an argument for her to be that, but I do think that her political strengths caused her to be higher than the other woman, in my opinion. Vendettas really wasn't a notable season for her at all, where it seemed like she was being kept around due to being a layup, and while having good enough relationships with people like Nelson and Bananas, though nothing came of it. We all know that she quit due to bedgate with some of the women, where she made it a bit past the halfway point of that season. She was initially paired with Kayla on Final Reckoning, but Kayla getting DQ'd was the best thing to happen to her, causing Kayleigh to be paired with Kam, and they worked really well together. This partnership was able to be in a good enough position politically, despite not being in the Lavender Ladies Alliance, and they took out the big brother pairs in Polly and Natalie, though that elimination was too equalized, and Devon and Jose in elimination. Then they lost the third redemption against Carmaria and Marie, and won the last one against Brad and Kyle, taking them out of the game. Notice that all of her eliminations were in Final Reckoning with Kam, so her 3-1 record is kind of deceiving, so you don't know how she does in a solo elimination, and I don't have the biggest faith in her there. So the big flaw she and Kam had were the purges, where they lost twice to them, where they are finally taken out of the game for good in the second to last round. War of the Worlds 2 was a brilliant political showing for her, as she was arguably the second or third most important person to that big alliance outside of Kam and Polly, where she had connections to Joss and Rogan, and also had the connection to Kam that brought the two teams together, and she was really the one that was calling the shots on the UK team. Unfortunately for Kayleigh, the Purge took her out in the second to last round before the final, so it's essentially history repeating itself here, taking out Joss with her. She grew politically, but I do think that her physical performances was mainly due to Kam, as she couldn't hold her own in the other 2 seasons. She really sucks at purges, and she only did 3 seasons within a 1.5 year period, so I can only put her so high. I say that she has never been booted early in a season, but at the same time, she also never made it to the final, so it almost cancelled itself out, despite her making it to the end game twice. At 10th is Natalie Negrotti, who competed on Vendetta's Final Reckoning and War of the Worlds 1. So I might end up putting her lower on the list based off of the time frame that I wrote the script for this and when I'm recording this. But Natalie really did pave the way for literally every other Big Brother person who debuted on the show, as she was clearly trying to navigate a new game. So she told people that she would protect them, but would consistently go back on it, and she just came off as very fake due to this. At the same time, she made it to a lot of troikas in the season, the most out of a woman in the season, if I'm remembering it correctly, and was very close to Bananas. But she ended up getting targeted in the second to last women's elimination against Kam, where Zach and Tony turned on her. But this elimination did favor her, but she didn't end up pulling it off, which really just wasn't a good look for her. But despite her rough political game, I do think the season is arguably her best one, though it does show some flaws in her game. She came into Final Reckoning being partnered with rookie Polly, and she had a target on her back, with there being 3 other newbie Big Brother 18 people obviously attached to her, and due to the Kyle and Carmaria mess, she and Polly were sent into the first elimination where they did lose to Kam and Kayleigh. Luckily for Natalie, the Redemption House existed, and the format of it meant that you could lose 2 eliminations and remain in the game if you or your allies, i.e. Devon and Jose, chooses the double cross and chooses to face you in the elimination, with this happening twice. She and Polly did win the third redemption against Brad and Kyle, where they did kind of side with Bananas and Carmaria, won 2 dailies in elimination against Tony and Bananas, which is probably her best moment on the show, and could have won the season, as janky as it is, had Natalie not run the wrong way. But despite her getting third here, I do consider a very janky season, so I don't rank it too highly. And then on War of the Worlds 1, it really wasn't a notable season for her, partially due to her being edited out, but she was chosen to go into the third elimination with her partner JP, where she and Julia lost easily against Maddie. So her being smaller is definitely a disadvantage, and she tends to crumble in eliminations, hence her poor elimination record. And while she is pretty good at dailies and endurance, her politics is all over the place and she comes off as too fake. She's only done 3 seasons within like a year or a year and a half time frame, but her accomplishments and her flaws have her here on the list. Final Ranking is too janky of a season for me to put too much weight in, but she has 2 other seasons in opposite directions, and her elimination record is just too bad for me to ignore. At 9th place, I have Melissa Reeves, who competed on Vendettas, Final Reckoning, Total Madness, and Battle for a New Champion. So she's kind of a hard person to look at when it comes to her career, but I think it just shows how all over the place Melissa is overall. Anyways, her first season is Vendettas, where she got close with Nicole as a political move, but she rubbed a lot of the women the wrong way, where she had a huge target on her. And due to her also being smaller as well as a rookie, it was easy for her to be sent into elimination, where she had to beat Alicia, though she was in automatically due to her injury, and then she was targeted in the next round, where she did lose her elimination to Sylvia. And then her drama with Kayla carried on from her debut to her next season, Final Reckoning, where she lost control and got into a physical altercation where the both of them were DQ'd after the first day. It was clear that she was on timeout for a few seasons, but she came back on Total Madness on her best behavior, and she was clearly working with the likes of Kyle, Bananas, and Dee, the latter which would be a problem after a while. And she was turned on, essentially. She won her only daily on the series as I'm recording this on Total Madness, and she won an elimination while pregnant against Nanny, which caused her to get a skull to go to the final, but her pregnancy caused her to quit the final, which is definitely understandable. Battle for a New Champion is at this point her second most successful season, which is a lot since it really isn't a good season for her. The only people she had was Thailand, who didn't have much power, and Tula, since their UK alliance fell apart, and Asaf ended up turning on her, breaking their parent pact, where they ended up being consistently targeted, and she got booted by mercenary Tori mid-season. I do think that Melissa shows resilience and she can play the calm under the radar game sometimes, but she also gets in her own way with the drama, and while she can win an elimination, she's just inconsistent. We haven't seen her in control of politics, and she's too inconsistent for me to put her any higher, but it will be interesting to see what happens to her on All Stars Rivals. At 8th is Nurys Mateo, who competed on Ride or Die's Battle for a New Champion and Battle of the Eras. From what she did on the show overall, Nurys is kind of all over the place. It's clear that on Ride or Dice, she was not close to a lot of the veteran women and was working with many of the rookie women and Amber, though she ended up blowing that. Nasa was trying to play the middle, and he kind of held her back with a lot of the political moves that she could have made, causing them to go after two easy targets when they did win the dailies. It did show that she is good at mental stuff, which will be important to remember when it comes to her journey, but as soon as the format changed to teams, Nurys was at the bottom, which is why she was taken out at the first female elimination against Amber in a pole wrestle mid-season. Battle for a New Champion is her peak season, obviously, as she entered the season with a pre-game alliance consisting of Jay, Asaf, and Michele, and she was also working with the other Right or Die women Ella, Olivia, Raven, and Mariah, and then got close to Horacio and Kayleigh throughout the season, with also there being an illusion of a quote-unquote USA alliance. The politics carried her through a lot of the season since she was not performing strongly in the dailies, but she made it clear that she was going to protect Kayleigh and Horacio, despite the house wanting them out, which weakened her position in the house at the endgame. And she had to win 3 eliminations against Horacio and Kayleigh, Olivia and James, and Mariah, all of them involving puzzles, getting her the silver prize of the season. And then Battle of the Eras, which is an outright awful season for her, where she isolated herself from the cast due to her relationship with Horacio, her getting last in the first daily, despite doing well on the puzzle in the beginning part of it, and then getting beat by Olivia in Arbor, being the first eliminated. So, just from this, she thrives with puzzles and can be political when she wants to, but is also messy in that element, and her lack of skills and non-mental things are a huge weakness for her. One mess season, one good season, and one bad season overall, having her right in the middle of this ranking. At 7th is Olivia Kaiser, who competed on Ride or Die's Battle for a New Champion and Battle of the Eras. I know some people think that she should probably be a bit lower than a few others, but I think that she is more consistent than them. Due to being a rookie and signing with the weaker players on Ride or Dies, she was sent into elimination several times in the season, where she won 3 of them against Tamara and Turbo, Raven and Johnny, and Jay and Michele. The only impressive elimination of hers in that season is the one with Raven, where she had audience help on the other 2, and we didn't see her compete on an individual elimination this season. She and Horacio never won a daily, despite getting close a few times, but she got some daily wins due to the format switching to the teams and being on the superior team, and she obviously made it to the final, where her injury took them out day 1 of the final. Olivia felt like she had something to prove on Battle for a New Champion, as a lot of people mentioned that she only made it far last season due to Horacio. She was in a good position for most of the season as she had the Ride or Die Alliance and the quote-unquote American Alliance and was seen as one of the more central people in those alliances, though her performances in the dailies really wasn't notable, where she only won one daily on a four-person team daily on the season. Ultimately, once conquest took place, she pleaded out of desperation and self-validation, letting Michele convince her to backstab Nurys, Kayleigh, and Horacio, but she is still at the bottom after that and taken out by Nurys right before the final. And then on the most recent season, Battle of the Eras, she had to take out Nurys immediately and then was in the final position on Era 4 and contributed to the team daily wins of the season and had her Ladies of Leisure alliance with Naya, Michele, Derek, and Ryan, and was obviously with Theo and probably Kayleigh as well. When the game turned individual, her alliance really didn't have power like that, and she was taken out relatively deep into the season, just missing the end game as Michele booted her. Olivia has never had a bad season, and she never went home early, and always makes it far on a season due to her social game, and she can hold her own in the dailies and the eliminations. So her consistency is why she is higher than some of the others. At sixth is Amber Borzotra, who competed on Double Agents, Spice License Allies, Ride or Dies, and World Championship. I do give Amber props for being one of the few Era 4 winners out of the women, but looking at her overall journey, it is relatively inconsistent. Obviously, she ended up joining the Big Brother Alliance in Double Agents with Josh, Kaycee, and Fessel, where she turned on the newbie woman for them, which was controversial, only to realize that she was at the bottom of that alliance at the end of the season. She got her skull by taking out the other Amber, and then kept her skull by taking out Tula right before the final, where she ended up winning as she was paired up with CT. But Amber realized that she was expendable in a Big Brother alliance, so when she entered late on Spice Nights and Allies, she was at the bottom of the Veterans Alliance, and despite Josh trying to reunite the Big Brother Alliance, Fessel almost immediately threw her into elimination, where she and Huey beat Corey and Michele. And after the drama with Pizzagate, it seemed like things were somewhat slowing down, though she still wasn't the most liked, and she was still low on the totem pole, where she and Jeremiah were thrown in so they could take out Corey and Bettina in the last round before the teams midway, but that ended up failing and backfiring. Ride or Dice is the season where things somewhat calmed down for her, as she was seen as an official veteran at this time, but she and her boyfriend Chauncey were one of the weaker teams in the game, so it was also one of the reasons why they lasted so long in the season. They were stupidly sent in by their allies Nelson and Nurys, where they did beat Darrell and Veronica, though it took them forever to solve the puzzle, and she was thrown in again during the team's portion where she beat Nurys, which was her most impressive elimination win. When the partners reunited again in the endgame, she and Chauncey were at the bottom of the totem pole, so they volunteered to go in since they knew they were getting voted in anyways, and they easily lost to Jordan and Anissa. There isn't anything to really say about her run on World Championship, where she and Troy were in a fine enough position, but she was DQ'd mid-season due to her pregnancy. Amber has great endurance and is great at eliminations, but she is not a multifaceted player, and she has a lot of issues with her social game, though it seems to be improving, but there's still some doubt pertaining if her win was just a fluke. At fifth place is Michele Fitzgerald, who competed on Spies, Lies, and Allies, Ride or Dies, USA 2, Battle for a New Champion, and Battle of the Eras. I never thought that Michele Fitzgerald would end up being this high on the list ranking the Era for a woman, especially with her poor start to the franchise. Due to being a rookie and a survivor on Spies, Lies, and Allies, she was targeted a lot during her brief time on that season, beating Michaela and reigning with Corey on the first elimination, though it was mainly Corey who won that elimination for them, let's be real, and losing with Corey again to Huey and Amber in the fourth round. She returned on Ride or Dies with her Ride or Die J, where they were aligned with a lot of the non-veterans and the non-vacation alliance people. Their side won a lot of dailies in the beginning of the season, though that was mainly due to the vacation people throwing the challenges, but they kept on making bad choices, which included Jay and Michele making those bad choices, where they won power to target Laurel and Jack. Jay, then deciding to target Jordan and Anissa due to his emotions, came back to bite them in the butt, where they were thrown in mid-season right before the format switch, where the entire house helped Horacio and Olivia beat her and Jay. It really did seem like things couldn't have gotten worse for her in regards to the show, but things started to improve for her. On USA 2, she was in the middle of the CBS Woman and the MTV Veterans, which put her in a good position, and she won the first elimination against Amira, though it was close. But she started screwing things up for herself, and she was caught playing both sides in the second to last round in USA 2, where she lost against Cassidy. Michele did battle for a new champion a few weeks afterwards, literally, where she had a lot of friendships and allegiances with people from Spice Lice and Allies, Ride or Dies, had her preseason alliance with Nurys, Asaf, and Jay, and she was very well connected overall. It was clear that she was dictating a lot of the decisions that was taking place in the season, and she also had a tie to Callum too. Essentially, a lot was going her way in the season, but a lot of people realized that she saw them as expendable, and it was clear that a lot of the alumni did not like her, hence Maria putting her into elimination during the chaos period. Michele would have easily made it to another final, but she was purged right before the final, in the last daily before the final. Everyone thought that Michele would be an early target on Battle of the Eras and have no chance in the game. She ended up winning the daily in the Invitational and was pretty well covered on Era 4, where she was in the Ladies of Leisure's alliance, and some of the Era 4 men were showmancing people in that alliance, and then she was an ancillary of the Vacation alliance for the first half of the season. Entering the second half of the season, with the Devon mess and Bananas targeting her, she had to win eliminations where she beats Tina, though that happened before Bananas targeted her, Naya, and Olivia, which all had a heavy mental component to it, and she technically got second place in the final, which was bumped down to third due to the karma votes. Michele is very adaptable, has a good elimination record, and has been improving in each season. I do have to note though that all of her elimination wins are mental except for her first one, where Corey did all the work there, but she's making a case for herself. At fourth place is Dee Nguyen, who competed on War of the Worlds 1, War of the Worlds 2, and Total Madness. I think she was someone that shocked a lot of people, and many people didn't have much expectations of her in the beginning of the War of the Worlds 1, especially because she talked about how she wasn't good at swimming. She was paired with Wes, and they worked together really well in the season as they won several dailies together, hence entering the tribunal, and they worked with one another throughout her entire career. And they did beat Zach and Zahida in the elimination, though it's not confirmed or not whether Zach threw this elimination or not. I also think she won an individual daily as well, but she was eliminated in the final women's elimination, not the final women's round. Note the difference, which she lost to Davon. Some people say that War of the Worlds 2 is her weakest season, despite her winning it, since she was seen as one of the weaker women regarding cardio and swimming, but she improved on that and she found herself in a decent position on the team. She also stayed out of elimination the entire season and did pull an upset with winning with her UK teammates, despite them being the losing team for most of the season. And winning this team season is harder than winning any other team season prior to this, especially the Era 1 and 2 seasons, due to the reasons that I've stated throughout several videos now. Total Madness was an individual season, and she won several dailies or tribunals throughout the season, and also played a lot more cutthroat here too. She beat Ashley in an early elimination, which Wes helped her with regarding the trivia on that season, and also beat Maddie when the entire house plotted on her. But her trying to target Jenny too soon, despite being her number one, pissed off everyone, causing her to remain a target for the last end of the season, and she was demolished by Jenny in the final women's elimination. So in her 3 seasons, Dee made it to the endgame in all of them. It's one of the few women winners from Era 4, though it is a bit weaker due to being a team season, where she was extremely well-rounded, but she got in her way and she has a short sample size that is only within like a 1 year or to 1.5 year time span, and we know for sure it's finished now. At third place is Kam Williams, who competed on Vendetta's Final Reckoning, War of the Worlds 1, War of the Worlds 2, Double Agents, and All Stars 4. It is where when a rookie is able to garner immediate respect from the veterans and to not let them play her out, but she carried herself like a vet from the moment she stepped on the show. Kam was aligned with the likes of Kayla and Marie, which really wasn't the best, and she was thrown in several times in the season due to her also being a rookie. As she won 2 eliminations against mercenaries, i.e. Tori and Ashley, and beat Natalie in an elimination that was disadvantageous to Kam. At the same time, she only won 1 daily in the season, and she was in the bottom 4 of the final, though a part of that was due to that stupid game that she had to play with the mercenary Melissa. Final Reckoning was a solid enough season for her, though she benefited from the jankiness of the format that I have to call out. The best thing that happened to her was her original partner, Melissa, getting herself DQ'd, as she got Kayleigh as a partner instead, as they worked very well together. Her big move was to target the 2 rookies against one another, which was lame, as she took out both BB pairings in elimination. But the biggest issue with her and Kayleigh are the purges, where they lost twice to. Kam and Kayleigh also spent the second half of the season in redemption, where they lost to Cara Maria and Marie, and then finally beating Brad and Kyle in the 4th and final redemption to get back into the game. War of the Worlds 1 is the worst season of her career, where she did have a few allies, but despite she and Ashley being paired together, they only won 1 daily. They were allowed to cheat with the elimination against Josh and Amanda, but they got booted mid-season against Polly and Ninja right before the format change. War of the Worlds 2 was a very impressive season for her, where she was arguably the main person controlling the politics on the season, but got none of the smoke compared to her allies like a Polly or a Cara Maria. She was seen, or even a Kayleigh, really. She was seen as a strong woman that everyone wanted to keep around, and she avoided elimination the entire season, where she performed well in the final until the purge in the final that happened. Double Agents continued the momentum where she dedicated her allegiances to all the Big Brother people and had a plot to target all of the winners, which was good, but she kind of let go of that goal very early on in the season. Kam got an easy skull against Teresa, won a few dailies in the season to catch all of her ops, and all the guys wanted to keep her around as a strong finals partner. All Stars 4 was a very mixed season for her, since while she did control a lot of the politics on the season, despite being younger than everyone on the cast and not knowing most of the people on the season due to her being very new, in comparison to them, she made a lot of really poor political moves throughout the season. She did win a few dailies and won an elimination against Tina to get a star, and she was essentially set up by Laurel, where she went in against Cara Maria and lost, thinking that Laurel was going to take her spot to face Cara Maria to get her star, but it didn't happen, and this was Kam's second earliest roster in the season, though it was still relatively deep in that season. Kam is a very well-rounded and versatile challenger while being one of the most political women on the show, but she lacks the clutch game, and with her now sporadic appearances, I doubt that she will ever win now. At second place is Kaycee Clark, who competed on Total Madness, Double Agents, Spies, Lies, and Allies, Ride or Dies, Battle of the Eras, and World Championship. Up until the very last minute, when I was finishing this script, I had her at number 1 over the other person, since she has done more seasons, but they've had the same longevity based on the years that they've competed in and based on when they started the show and being active recently. But since that person beat her more than once, and then also having the same amount of years since they started their seasons to the current, not referring to the seasons, but just the amount of years since they both started in 2019, I thought the change was fitting. Kaycee entered the show on Total Madness and was not treated like a rookie at all, where she got an easy skull against Kayla and aligned with the likes of Nany and Anissa, causing her to get to the final and almost winning the season, technically, by getting second, though she was not close to beating Jenny at all. Double Agents was another good season for her, as she won several dailies in the season with her partner Leroy, and working with the likes of Nany, Anissa, Leroy, and Kam brought them much success in the season, and she also got an easy skull against Teresa, causing her to make it to her second consecutive final. After switching with Fessel right before the final, she and Fessel ended up getting taken out on day 1 of the final because of an injury she got. Spies, Lies, and Allies is another season where she did well, as the Vacation Alliance was formed at this point, and she escaped elimination the entire season, before the final at least, as she did win a few dailies in the season, though most of that was due to the team's portion of the season, or during that portion of the season. She and Nany had to face one another in the final, where she beat Nany, who was also throwing it to her, though I doubt it would have made much of a difference. And despite doing poorly in the first day of the final, she was able to choose her partner, and switching with CT cost her to get her win. Yeah. Ride or Dies would have been another season where she made it to the end, but she was paired with her brother, who was not a strong player, and because he was eliminated midway, when the format changed, she was forced to compete for the spot back into the game, where they were out right before the end game due to losing 2 back-to-back eliminations against Fessel and Mariah and Anissa and Jordan. World Championship was another impressive season for her, since while she was at the top in the first half, her partner Ben, being DQ'd, forced her to be paired with Troy, and they had an underdog run during the second half of the season. She won 4 eliminations in the season, 1 with Ben against Wes and Zara, and 3 with Troy against Benja and Jody, Durell and Kiki, and Emily and Yes in the end stretch, making it to their 4th final where she got 3rd place overall. Kaycee's worst season is Battle of the Eras, where she was in a good spot on Era 4, but she didn't have strong relationships with people from the first 2 eras, so when Rachel won the last Teams Daily, she was insistent on targeting the Vacation Alliance, causing her to go against Tori, barely losing the elimination right before the mid-season format change. I do think she is good at laying under the radar, getting into a solid alliance, running it out, and winning eliminations to save herself when needed, but she isn't as adaptable as we thought, which we saw in the eras, and she's also not the best at finals, but she's one of the stronger women on the show overall, and definitely over damn near everyone who debuted in Era 4 who's a woman. So, at first place is Jenny West, who competed on War of the Worlds 2, Total Madness, and Battle of the Eras. So I had her at second right up until the last minute because she only did 3 seasons compared to Kaycee's 6. But then, really looking at her and Kaycee, and them both starting the show in the same year, and Jenny beating Kaycee twice, I decided to move her up here, and she's the only woman from this era who won twice. Just from looking at her on War of the Worlds 2, it was clear that she was a big threat, and she was the strongest woman on the UK team, despite being a rookie. And she was also in the minority alliance. Due to this, and being on the losing team, it's not shocking that she ended up in an early elimination, where she did beat Nicole. Her team kept on losing, and the rookies kept on getting taken out, but she just missed the endgame as she was taken out by Tori in the Hall Brawl, but she was the final rookie remaining, and she was close to getting to the endgame. She was cast on the next season, and with it being an individual season, she was seen as the biggest threat. Dee gave her an easy skull with the first woman's elimination by taking out Jen, and then she won a decent amount of dailies throughout the season, while being aligned with the likes of Bananas, Rogan, and a few others. After a failed coup to take her out, she got sloppy around the endgame where she threw Rogan under the bus and she was thrown into elimination with Dee, where she took out her rival Dee and beat everyone in the final, including the men, getting her first win here. After not being on the show for almost 5 years, she got her spot on Battle of the Eras, where she was the outsider on her team, with the exception of Josh, and she was thrown into an elimination where she did beat Anissa. Her ties to earlier eras would pay dividends once the format went individual, and she won a few dailies in the second half of the season, while taking out ally Aviv. Making it to her second final, she completely dominated the final, and the karma points couldn't even take away her first place spot. As a competitor, she is great, and she got better politically, but her social game is not the best, though you can say that it was due to her not being cast for 5 years. Just from her stats in finals, never losing a final, and those being 2 individual finals, never being an early boot, and her elimination record, she is easily the best out of the era for women. Anyways, that is my list for the era for women, and it was relatively simple, to be honest, though it definitely had to do with the fact that not many of them did much seasons since they're in the most recent era. So that's pretty much it. I'm going to be back with more content soon. I don't know if I'm going to make an overall ranking combining everyone from the 4 eras per gender, of course. So like all the women who did 3 seasons and all the men who did 3 seasons. I don't know if I'm going to make videos for those, but I'm going to be covering the All-Star seasons and doing a few more Big Brother and other content as well. Thank you all for watching, and I'll be back with other stuff soon. Bye!